You're skinning a deer with a sharp piece of stone, and the stone slips. It opens your hand from the base of your thumb down to the wrist, deep enough that you can see things a hand is not supposed to show you. There is no bandage, no stitches, no antiseptic, no doctor, not for 10,000 years in any direction. And here is the part nobody tells you. Out here, that cut is not the thing that kills you. The cut is just the door. What kills you comes 3 days later, when the edges turn hot and red, when a yellow smell rises off your own skin, when the fever climbs into your head and does not come back down. For most of human history, a wound this size was a slow death sentence. And yet, somehow, you exist. Which means that somewhere back down your family line, a long chain of people got hurt exactly like this, again and again, and figured out how to not die from it. So the real question is not whether they got wounded. They got wounded constantly. The question is, what on earth did they do about it? And some of the answers are so strange and so disgusting that modern hospitals are quietly using them again right now. Before we get into it, a quick thing. This channel is still small, and a like and a subscribe genuinely push it forward. It is free, and it helps more than you would think. All right, back to your bleeding hand. Let's be honest about what a body faced back then, because it reframes everything. If you lived as a hunter and a forager, your skin took a beating every single day. Stone tools cut you. Thorns tore you. Rocks split your shins. Animals bit, kicked, and gored you. A bad fall could turn a bone into a spear, pushing out through the skin. Injury was not an event. It was a constant background hum of daily life. But the wound itself, the cut, the tear, the broken skin, that was rarely what did the killing. Your body is actually very good at closing a cut. The thing that turned a survivable injury into a corpse was infection. Bacteria get into the open tissue, they multiply, and if your body cannot wall them off in time, they spill into your blood. We call that sepsis today. It is still dangerous even now, with a hospital and a bag of antibiotics hanging over your arm. Back then, with none of that, an infected wound was often just the beginning of a countdown. So when we ask how ancient humans healed their wounds, what we are really asking is how they fought a war against something they could not even see. They had no idea bacteria existed. Not a clue. And yet, through nothing but thousands of years of watching what worked and what buried people, they built a toolkit that was far smarter than it had any right to be. First problem, and it is the loud one. You're losing blood, and you're losing it fast. Lose enough, and none of the clever stuff later matters, because you will not be conscious for it. So the first move was pressure and packing, the same first move a paramedic makes today. But what did you pack a wound with when you had no gauze? This is where it gets interesting. Across the world, wildly separated groups of humans reached for some of the same materials, which is usually a sign that the material actually worked. One of the most common was moss, specifically a spongy plant called sphagnum moss. It could soak up many times its own weight in blood and fluid, and it turns out it is also mildly acidic, which quietly holds some bacteria back. This is not ancient superstition. During the First World War, when factory bandages ran out, armies harvested this exact moss by the ton and packed it into soldiers' wounds, a remedy older than farming, going back into a trench in 1916. People also used cobwebs pressed into a cut because the fine threads help blood clot and knit a scab together, and there were plants chosen specifically to stop bleeding. One of them was yarrow, a common little roadside flower. It was used to slow bleeding so widely and for so long that one of its old nicknames is soldier's woundwort, and its scientific name traces back to the Greek hero Achilles, who was said to carry it to treat his men on the battlefield. Think about that. A weed you have walked past 100 times was a frontline medicine for thousands of years, and when the bleeding simply would not stop, there was the brutal option. Fire. Pressing something hot against a wound, what we call cauterizing, burns the tissue shut and seals the vessels. It is agonizing. It does real damage, and in a true emergency, it is also the difference between living and bleeding out on the ground. People made that trade when they had to. Bleeding slowed. Good. But you have a hole in your hand that is hanging open, and an open wound is an open invitation. It needs to be closed. So how do you stitch a wound with no needle and no thread? You improvise both. Ancient healers used long thorns and sharpened slivers of bone to pin the edges of a wound together, and then lace them shut with plant fibers, animal sinew, or strands of hair. Real sutures, made from a bush and a dead animal. But there is one method here that sounds completely made up, and it is not. In parts of Africa, South America, and India, people closed wounds using ants, specific large ants with powerful jaws. You hold the edges of the cut together, you bring an ant up to the seam, and you let it bite down so its jaws clamp both sides of the skin like a living staple. Then you twist the body off and leave the head in place. The jaws stay locked, sometimes for days, holding the wound shut while it heals underneath. People invented the surgical staple using an angry insect, thousands of years before anyone built one out of metal. When you see something that strange show up on 3 different continents, it is not a coincidence. It is a good idea that people kept rediscovering. Here is where the story flips, and where it gets genuinely humbling for the modern world. Because the next set of remedies is not primitive at all. We abandoned them, felt clever about it, and then came crawling back. Start with honey. To an ancient healer, honey on an open wound was one of the best treatments there was, and they were completely right without knowing why. Honey pulls water out of bacteria and basically dries them to death. It is naturally acidic, and it slowly releases tiny amounts of hydrogen peroxide. It is, in effect, a natural antibacterial gel. The Egyptians wrote it into their oldest medical texts, and people were smearing it on wounds long before that. And today, if you walk into a modern wound clinic, you can find medical-grade honey in a sterile tube, cleared by regulators, sitting on the shelf as a real treatment for stubborn wounds. We reinvented it, sterilized it, gave it a brand name, and sold it back to ourselves. Then there is tree resin, the sticky sap that bleeds out of pines and other trees. Ancient people packed it onto wounds, and it works on multiple fronts. It physically seals the cut like a natural glue, and it carries compounds that fight bacteria and fungi. Pine sap was a portable, waterproof, antimicrobial bandage growing on the side of a tree. They used garlic, which has genuine antibacterial properties they identified purely by trial and error. They used certain clays and muds that can actually trap and kill bacteria. None of these people could explain a single reason why any of it worked. They just knew, from watching person after person, that the ones treated this way lived more often. That is science. Slow, painful, unwritten science, running as an experiment across thousands of funerals. All right, let's talk about the one on the thumbnail, because it is the best example of the whole idea. Picture a wound that has already gone bad. Part of the flesh is dead and rotting, and that dead tissue is a feast for infection. To heal, it has to come out. Cutting it away with a stone blade is clumsy and takes healthy tissue with it. So people found a different surgeon. Maggots. Fly larvae, placed into the wound on purpose. And before you close the tab, understand exactly what they do. The right kind of maggot eats only the dead, rotting flesh and leaves the living tissue completely alone. They are more precise than a blade. On top of that, as they feed, they release substances that kill bacteria and clean the wound bed. Groups from the Aboriginal peoples of Australia to healers in Central America figured this out and used it deliberately. And here is the kicker. This is not a horror story from a dark age we escaped. In 2004, maggot therapy was officially cleared as a legitimate medical treatment. Right now, in modern hospitals, on patients with wounds that will not heal, doctors are applying sterile maggots and getting results that clean chemicals cannot match. The disgusting cave remedy has a medical billing code. So when the title asks how ancient humans healed their wounds, part of the honest answer is that they used tools we spent centuries feeling too advanced for, and then sheepishly picked back up. None of this was random. This is the part people underestimate the most. Ancient humans carried an enormous library of plant knowledge, and they carried it entirely in memory, passed from one person to the next around the fire. Take willow bark. Chewing it or brewing it eased pain and brought down fever. And it did that because it contains a compound your body converts into something very familiar. Willow bark is, more or less, natural aspirin. People were using the active ingredient of one of the most common drugs on Earth thousands of years before a factory ever bottled it. And this knowledge is far older than our own species. In a cave in Spain called El Cedrón, scientists scraped the hardened plaque off the teeth of Neanderthals who lived around 48,000 years ago. Trapped in that plaque, they found two remarkable things. Poplar, a plant that carries the same pain-killing compound as aspirin, and traces of a specific mold from the Penicillium family, the same family of mold that gave us penicillin. One of those Neanderthals had a nasty dental abscess and a gut bug, and appears to have been medicating himself with a natural painkiller and a natural antibiotic. A supposedly brutish cave creature was self-medicating with the ancestors of the two most important drugs in your bathroom cabinet. Let that reset your image of them for a second. There is one more, and it is the one that makes people wince the hardest. What did they do about a wound to the head, a cracked skull, or the swelling and pressure that can build under the bone after a blow? The answer, astonishingly, was surgery. All over the ancient world, from Europe to South America, we have found skulls with neat holes deliberately carved into them. This is called trepanation, and it means someone took a sharpened stone and slowly scraped or drilled a hole through a living person's skull, probably to relieve pressure or treat a head injury, fully awake, with no anesthetic worth the name. Now, you would assume that is just a fancy way to die. But here is the detail that stops researchers cold. On a huge number of these skulls, the bone around the hole has grown back. Smoothed over, healed. The bone only heals if the person is still alive, which means these were not executions or rituals on the dead. These were operations, and the patients survived them, sometimes more than once. Ancient humans were performing brain surgery with rock tools and walking away from it. Read that again and sit with how much skill and steady nerve that took. But under all of this, the moss and the honey and the maggots and the drilled skulls, there is one thing that made every single remedy possible. And it is easy to miss because it is not a plant or a tool. It is other people. Think about your torn hand again. You cannot pack your own wound, watch it day and night, and hunt for food, and haul water, and defend yourself, all while burning with fever and unable to grip anything. A serious wound does not just hurt you. It makes you useless, sometimes for weeks. In a world where you survived by what you could carry and catch, being useless should have been the end. It was not, because the group carried you. We know this is not a nice guess, because the bones prove it. Remember that Neanderthal world for a moment. In a place called Shanidar, researchers found a man who had lived for years with a withered arm, a bad leg, and blindness in one eye. He could not have fed or protected himself. He lived anyway, for a long time, which means other people fed him, sheltered him, and kept his wounds clean while he could do nothing in return. That is the real answer to how ancient humans healed. The moss and the maggots were only ever half of it. The other half was somebody choosing to sit with you, change your dressing, and share their food while you were no use to anyone. Healing was never something you did alone. It was something the group did to you and for you. So step back and look at what these people actually pulled off. With no microscope, no germ theory, no chemistry, no idea that bacteria even existed, they learned to stop bleeding with moss and fire, to close wounds with thorns and living insects, to fight infection with honey and mold and pine, to clean rotting flesh with maggots, to dose pain and fever with the raw ingredients of aspirin, and to open a human skull and have the patient survive. We did not outgrow their medicine. In a lot of ways, we simply forgot it, got humbled, and came back. The honey is in the clinic. The maggots have a license. The moss went to war. The willow became the aspirin you swallow without a second thought. Their remedies were not primitive fumbling. They were the results of the longest, hardest experiment in human history, written down in nobody's book and paid for in real lives, generation after generation, until enough of it worked that you are here to hear about it. The next time you tear open a knuckle and reach, without thinking, for a little plastic strip and a tube of cream, remember what stood between your ancestors and that same cut. A handful of moss, a smear of honey, a patient stranger, and the stubborn shared refusal to let one bad wound be the end of the story. If that landed for you, stick around, because we keep digging into the strange, brilliant things ancient humans actually did to survive. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.